Alexander and the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. I went to sleep with gum in my mouth, and now there's gum in my hair. And when I got up out of bed this morning, I tripped on a skateboard. And by mistake, I dropped my sweater in the sink while the water was running. I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. At breakfast, Anthony found a Corvette Stingray car kit in his breakfast cereal box. And Nick found a junior undercover agent code ring in his cereal box. But in my breakfast cereal box, all I found was breakfast cereal. I think I'll move to Australia. In the carpool, Miss Gibson let Becky have a seat by the window. Audrey and Elliot got seats by a window too. I said I was going to be scrunched. I said I was going to be smashed. I said if I don't get a seat by the window, I'm going to be sick. And no one even answered. I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. Now this is a kid's book, right? But it has so much truth to it, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know about you, but have you ever woken up and you just kind of started off the day, something happened, maybe not gum in your hair, maybe gum in your hair, I don't know your sleeping habits, but something happened and it's just a horrible, terrible, no good, very bad day. Have you ever had those moments? Mine was Thursday. So I woke up late, and my kids had woken up, and they were it was a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day for them. They started off that way, and it was just, I was like an hour late to a meeting with my boss, Brandon. It was horrible. It was okay, he was late too, but still, it was one of those things, and I could just tell the day was not going to go how I wanted it. I came in with the sole purpose to meet with Brandon and then start in on finishing up my sermon. This very sermon that I'm teaching today. And so I couldn't focus. I was struggling. I went from my office out here to the gathering area where hopefully nobody could find me. I could just sit and write and just let God speak through me. And there was nothing. I mean, it was horrible. So my mother-in-law was coming to town, or is in town. So were my parents. Happy birthday, Mom. Today's her birthday. So I know, I'm only up here so often, and it happens to be on my mom's birthday. So, and so my mother-in-law was coming in town from Florida. Perfect timing, wouldn't you say, with all the hurricanes and things, and God just took care of that. And so my wife and my kids are in our minivan and at the airport, kind of doing that whole circling thing, waiting for her to come out. And I get a phone call. It's about 12:30. I get a phone call, and Hope says, "The van's driving funny. I think I have a flat tire." I immediately, stop driving. Pull over, whatever. I don't want to have to buy a new tire. Pull over, kind of thing. And she's like, "Well, I'm in where you pick them up, and they're going to yell at me to move." I said, "I don't care. Tell them I'm on my way. You got a flat tire. Don't move," kind of thing. Okay, well, I run out of the church building, right? I put my computer down in my office. I run out of the church building. I get in my truck, and I drive all the way to the airport as fast as I can without getting a ticket, right? Because that would just add to the day, all right? And so I'm getting there, and I get there, and lo and behold, the manufacturers of Chrysler Town & Country minivan decides, in their epic wisdom, to place the spare tire up front underneath the vehicle between the driver and the passenger side. So to find the little lever thing that I have to wrench down and get the tool and all this stuff and try to drag it out from underneath the van, it takes me a little bit of time. Did I mention my kids were there? They're in the van, they're watching a movie or something, so I'm trying to get this tire off. Police are coming around, and I'm like, yes, I'm sweating, trying to get this tire off. I'm working, my truck is right here beside me, and I'm trying to do as fast as I can, and I'm trying to get all this stuff, jack it up, and all these things, and stuff. And so it just, one thing after another. And did I mention my kids were with us? So they're in the van. We're trying to keep them contained because we don't want them to die being run over at the airport. That's even worse than sitting at the airport. And so we're trying to do all this. And I finally get the spare on. And did I mention my kids were with me? And they hadn't eaten until breakfast because Nana was supposed to be picked up at 12:30. Well, Dad didn't get there and get the tire all situated and everything to where they could actually even leave the airport until about 1:30, 1:45. And then you don't go to lunch on a spare. You go right to Discount Tire, right? You go to the tire shop. So they could start working on it. So we go there, and of course, lo and behold, the hole is too big to be repaired. New tire number one. I say number one because they look at all your other tires, and they say, hey, this tread is really bad. And it was. And the safety of my family, so they said, you now need 2 tires. Really? Thanks. How much is that going to cost me? Right? Start off with a horrible day and keep going. Now, does it end there? No. Remember, kids were with us. Hangry. All right? Hangry at this point. They're going to eat us if we don't feed them. Right? So we go to Cracker Barrel. My mother-in-law's favorite place, great place. We go to Cracker Barrel. But apparently we got the slowest server in the world with hangry kids. So Theo decides to throw a fit, and my 2-year-old. He decides to throw a fit. The kind of fit where as you're walking out, it's like, ah! Right? Every head in the building is staring at us as we're walking out. He is screaming his head off. Right? We finally get him to calm down. I go back in. Food is still not at the table. So finally we get through it. We realize that my daughter, Annabelle, who just turned 1, we had a party for her yesterday, so excited about that, has like a sore under her arm. We don't know if it's a bite or what, but it's just a really bad sore. And so Hope says, well, we're in town. Should I call and see if they can squeeze us in to the doctor's office? I'm like, please do that. Remember, kids are with us. They're screaming at the table while Hope's trying to figure out this doctor thing. They can't fit us in at the normal doctor's office, but yet the company can fit us in at a separate one, kind of thing. I'm like, all right, fine. So we finally go back to Discount Tire, get the van, switch vehicles really quick. Ellie and Theo are upset because they're going with me because they're going to come home and take a nap, right? So I get to take the screaming kids home. Ellie and Judy and Hope go to this doctor's office. About halfway home, I get a phone call. Hope says, I went to the wrong doctor's office. It's 4:30 and they're about to close at 5, right? I went to the wrong doctor's office. Wait, what? She says, but I think they're about to see us. It may be okay. All right. So I hang up. I take the kids and we finally get home. Oh, no, I forgot. I came here, right? I came here to grab my computer. Okay? Not a big deal, right? Until my 4-year-old, for whatever reason, is fighting with Theo, a 2-year-old, and decides, and I thought we were done with this, decides to bite the 2-year-old. I'm like, seriously? All right? Terrible, horrible, very, very bad day, right? And we keep going. So we finally get home. I put the kids to bed. It's like 4:30. They're going to go to bed in a couple hours anyway, but I need them away. So they go to bed. My daughter comes down the stairs 15 minutes later. Morning, Daddy. Finally, my wife and my mother-in-law get home. Dinner starts because it's about that time, and it's almost time for them to go to bed. We shower up, we put them in bed, which that alone is a process. My son Theo, 2 years old, has figured out he can get out of the crib. It's time to move him to a big boy bed, but we threaten his life to stay in that crib. He doesn't. It's about 8 o'clock. My wife looks at me and says, you okay? No. I need this day to be done. Have you ever had one of those days? I think God was really just trying to give me an illustration for the sermon that I couldn't finish that day. See, the fact is, whether or not you're like Alexander or whether you're not like the Worleys, at some point, every single person has had a bad day. And you want to curl up in the corner and just make it go away, right? Regardless if it's a day, a week, a month, a year. Sometimes we have those moments in our life where it just simply seems like we want to do nothing. Or maybe you're like me, you start crying or yelling or hitting or throwing or just freaking out because it's been a terrible, horrible, very bad day. We've all had those moments. Now, they may not be as comical as what I told you. Maybe sometimes it's the trial or the struggle that you went through is losing your job. I remember the very first church I was in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. It was a hard time for me. Very first ministry, straight out of college. I went through 2 senior pastors within a short amount of time. We had a full staff. Next thing I know, about 6 months to a year into it, I'm the only person on staff. It was hard. It was a struggle. So bad so I could remember with the second senior pastor sitting in his office. We were praying together about things, and I remember hearing this prayer. I'm sitting kind of across from his desk, and he just simply says, "And God, please give Kyle direction, whether that's here or somewhere else." What? I'm telling you. Talk about a serious struggle. You know, another struggle we've been through in our lives is having kids. Many of you know or may not know, Hope and I tried for 6 years, first 6 years of our marriage, to have kids. We paid more money for fertility. At the end of those 6 years, I remember simply laying on my bed crying, saying, "God, I can no longer do this on my own. Please bless us with kids." Within the next 4 years, we had 4 children. I now lay on my bed saying, "God, please help me get through this." Serious struggles in life. What about family conflict? Maybe a child who's disrespectful, throws tantrums, hits, kicks. Maybe a child who's constantly thinks they know better than you. Maybe a spouse who just constantly pushes buttons either way. Maybe that mom or dad who just constantly, you're full grown, but yet keeps speaking into your life whether you want it or not. Maybe it's the conflict with that aunt or uncle that you see or try to avoid because they're always going to tell you what to do or what you're doing wrong. Conflict, struggles. Maybe it's none of the things, but maybe it's health. Maybe it's a chronic illness that you're struggling with. Maybe it's not even a chronic illness, but allergies out here in the East Mountains. Maybe it's something to that extent where you finally feel like you're getting better, and then yet, once again, something catches, or you catch something. I think it catches you, really. But anyway, unable to participate simply because life and sickness is a struggle. They're all struggles. And we could list struggle after struggle after struggle. With a room this size, the numbers are astronomical of the struggles that we've gone through in life. But I want you to know, take some comfort in these times of struggle. These times of a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. And you're going, wait a second, why are you saying this? Because James, the biological brother of Jesus, says the same exact thing. If you have your Bibles, James chapter 1, 2 through 4 is my life verse. Because it gives us encouragement when the bottom of life is falling out. If you'll notice, I have James chapter 1, 2 through 4, the 1984 version of the NIV. That's the one that I memorized, the one that really spoke to me. And it says this: "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work in you, that you may be mature and complete and not lacking anything." James literally starts his letter off this way. He literally says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds." Now we're going to break that down a little bit. He starts off saying, "Consider." Now, consider in the Greek term is very similar to the English term, right? It means to dwell on, meditation, purposeful thought. It's also sometimes alluded to like a cow chewing its cud. We're in a rural area. You guys know how cows eat, right? They eat, they chew their cud, they swallow it, and what happens? Yeah, man, best junior high lesson ever was right there. Wait, they back up? Yes. Then they chew it again, and what? And then it comes back up, back and forth, like 4 or 5 times, right? That's what James is saying. He's saying, listen, consider it, think on it, dwell on it, all right? James is commanding us to consider our trials, our struggles, our terrible, horrible, no good, bad days as what? Pure joy. Pure joy. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm going through something, when life throws me into a whirlwind, the first thing I'm not going is, oh, I am so joyful because of this. That is not the first thing I'm doing. The first thing I'm doing is freaking out. Maybe not outside physically, but in my mind is running 100 miles an hour. And I'm looking for the corner to go hide in. Right? It's one of those things. But James says, listen, think about it and consider it pure joy. Now, I have to tell you, there is a difference between joy and happiness. If you don't know that, listen. Joy is essentially somewhat of a state of mind, not because of something we've done, but because of who God is. Happiness is circumstantial. Happiness is something that's typically based on an outside thing. Think about it, Christmas time. You receive a gift. I'm happy, but for how long? I think depending on your age, depends on the length of time, right? You know, 1-year-old, yay, next present. Think about it, you get a bonus at work, you receive a smile or a gift from your spouse or, something to that extent, it makes you happy. But for how long? James is saying, listen, you can be joyful at all times. You can choose joy in the good times and the bad. Because it's a state of mind, not because of who we are, but because of who Jesus is. I don't have to be happy about a circumstance or a situation or a struggle, but I can be joyful through it, is what he says. He says, consider it pure joy whenever. Notice James here doesn't say if, right? Nowhere in there does he say if. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, if you face trials of any kind. Nope. He says whenever. You guys have heard the phrase, death and taxes are the only thing certain in this world? Nope. There's a bunch of stuff we could add to that, but I also believe trials and struggles in life are definitely one that can be added to that. And James knows that, and so he says, whenever. When Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden because of the sin, because of the separation, when they told God, listen, your way is not better, my way is. When that happened, God essentially tells Adam and Eve, there's going to be struggles. You're going to have to work in the field and toil really hard. And you having kids is really going to be a hard thing. Everyone will go through trials. And so James knows that, and he says, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face what? Trials of many kinds. Notice trials is plural. I think so many times we think we're going to go through something and we're just done with it. But yet trials of many kinds. The Greek word there for trials is not only a struggle, a physical struggle, but it's also temptation. Think about it. Life is going great. Everything's good. And all of a sudden, a temptation comes up. Out of the blue. Satan throws it at you. Walking along, and all of a sudden, an image pops in your mind. Walking along, and somebody's talking about, that coworker, and you jump into it. All of a sudden, you see what I'm saying? It could go on. And so James is saying, listen, trials. It could even be temptations. There might be times in our lives when things are good and yet a temptation comes around. And he doesn't say just one trial or one temptation. It's plural and different, many kinds. See, James knows that when it comes to life, there will always be struggles, and each struggle can look different at different times in our lives. Think about it. My daughter Annabelle right now just turned 1. A struggle she's going through is walking. Some of us still have that struggle, but the majority of us have overcome that. It looks different at each phase. Each struggle that I shared with you at the beginning of the sermon is different. Why? Because of each phase of my life. As long as your life is still your life, you will go through struggles. As long as your life keeps going, so will the trials in your life. We live in a broken world, and that's how it works. Now, if James had simply stopped and said, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of any kind, we would have been saying, are you kidding me? Why? What? I'm not going to consider going through a hardship, going through struggles as joy. Why would I do that? He answers his own question. Why? Why? Because you know the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work in you, that you may be mature and complete and not lacking anything. Going through trials or struggles or the terrible, horrible, very bad, no good days develops perseverance. Now, perseverance you may think is not a big deal, but yet it really is. When we really look at the word perseverance, what is it? Perseverance is stick-to-itiveness. That's not a word. I Googled it. So maybe I made up a word. I don't know, but it fits, right? Stick-to-itiveness, right? Even in the midst of obstacles. I don't use Webster's dictionary all that often because over the years it's really kind of been perverted a little bit with some of their definitions and words and things. But I love what it says about perseverance. Listen to Webster's dictionary. It says this: a continued effort to do or achieve something despite difficulties, failures, or opposition. So I told you a little bit earlier that my wife's family is from Florida. A couple weeks back, we actually went to Florida to visit my wife's family, and it was great. My daughter, Ellie, she's 4 years old, even on the plane. Are we going to the beach, Daddy? Yes. We land the plane. Are we going to the beach, Daddy? Yes. She loves the beach. We love the beach. I remember taking my daughter out in the ocean, right? And we didn't go super far because you don't want to drown a kid, right? That's just a bad thing to do. And we even had a life jacket on her so that, should something happen. And I'm out there with the waves, and we're looking out in the ocean, and the waves are coming. And so I'm kind of like pulling her up and, holding on to her and stuff like that. Well, waves are continual. They just keep coming. And all of my wisdom, we're going along, she's having a blast, all this kind of stuff. I turn around to look back towards the beach where Hope and Theo are, and Annabelle. And I look back, and just as I look back, a wave comes and knocks me over. Now, I don't know about you. Have you ever fallen over and yet trying to hold something, right? So I'm holding my daughter, and I am literally falling on my hands and knees, face down in the water, and I'm kind of like that, So I come up, and I am like, I just almost drowned, and Ellie, my 4-year-old, was like, yay! I'm like, you would, kid, you would. And the reason I tell you that is because when it talks about perseverance, the Greek word here literally means to withstand the tidal wave of life. One of the biggest concerns right now about the hurricane is not only the water and the force of the storm, but how it will rise. Houston saw that. To be able to withstand the surge of the water. And just like life, perseverance is when the waves of life knock you down and you learn to get back up and withstand them. That's what perseverance is. When the continual waves of life knock you down. Because the waves of life are continual. Therefore, perseverance is a process, an ongoing process. It's continual. If you really think about it, when the waves of the ocean are similar, but yet in some ways may be different, the same way the trials of your life may be similar and yet slightly different. Learning to overcome them may take some time. It may require some perseverance to get back up and withstand once again when the next wave hits. It will require us to keep going, keep learning, keep persevering. So why should we care about persevering? Why not just allow life to hit us, knock us down? He continues on in verse 4. Perseverance must finish his work in you, that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. God created us. He created us in his image. And in fact, I love what Isaiah 64:8 says, yet you, Lord, are our Father. We are the clay and you are the potter. We are all the work of your hand. When we go through struggles, it's so that God can continually mold us and shape us. When we go through that horrible, terrible, bad day, it's so that God can make us into who he wants us to be. I work primarily with students, junior high and high school students. And there is a phenomenon that has been happening and is continuing happening. Maybe you've heard it before. A simple phrase, you be you. Whatever that looks like, you be you. On Wednesday nights when we have 60 plus kids here, we say, you be who God has created you to be. And He is continually making you. Because when you be you, there's failure in that. But if we acknowledge that God is continually shaping us and molding us into who He wants us to be, it is because of that that we can have joy through the trial. The Greek word for complete literally means complete in all of its parts. No part wanting or unsound. Complete, entire, whole. If you look in our world today, people simply want to feel whole, and yet they're trying to fill it with so many other things. Being mature and complete, honestly, is something that we won't achieve. It won't come to true fruition until we're literally standing face to face to God. But according to James, the process is starting now. And it's because of that process of being made complete that James says that we can have joy. Because of the one who's shaping us. James says that even though you and your spouse are fighting, even though you have lost your job, even though you are so financially strapped it's not even funny, even though your kids are driving you nuts, your kids won't talk to you or have anything to do with you, even though you hate your job, coworkers, or boss, even though you struggle with sin after sin, even through every struggle and terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, we can have joy. Why? Here's the bottom line. Because God is working in and through every trial to make us complete. God is working through and in every trial to make us complete. How many times of your life have you gone through something only later to realize that God is the one who has helped you through it? So my next step is simply this. I say simply, it's a difficult thing to do. My next step is to trust God in the process and in the midst of the trials. I told you there were 6 years between Hope and I getting married and having kids, and at the end of that 6 years, I literally was laying on my bed crying, saying, God, please, I can no longer do this. It is almost like something clicked, and God said, that's what I've wanted the whole time. What would it look like if instead of waiting to the end, waiting to this point where we can no longer do anything but yet fall down? What if we started that so much earlier? What would our life look like? I love what Romans 8:28 says. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who have been called, who love Him and who have been called according to His purpose. God is faithful when we are faithful to bring Him our trials. Trust Him in the process. Trust Him in the midst of it. And that's hard to see, isn't it? Sometimes when we're in the middle of it, it's really difficult to see the outcome. And yet God sees it all. The second thing is, ask God what you can learn through this trial. Ask God what you can learn through this trial. The very end of the verse, right? Verse 4, mature and complete, what? Not lacking anything. If we started to ask God, what can I learn through this? What is happening? A couple things are going to happen. The first thing is, your perspective of the trial will change. I don't know about you, but when I've started to go through something and it's just horrible. God, why? Why is this happening to me? Why are you doing this? Why, right? I become the victim. You're doing this to me. But when I am able to calm down, when I'm able to think, and when I'm able to say, okay, God, what do you want me to learn? All of a sudden, no longer am I the victim, but I'm the student. My wife gets very frustrated with me because sometimes life hits and I'm as calm as all get out. It has nothing to do with me, but it has everything to do with this verse. Why aren't you freaking out? God will take care of it. I'm just trying to figure out what He's trying to teach me through it. Can't you freak out a little bit? Okay. And there are times I don't even achieve this. I don't want you to hear that I'm perfect in this. But this question completely changed who I am today. I am the person I am today because I understand this verse a little bit more. And it gives me the ability, especially in the hard times, to move forward. I shared with you my first ministry. It was a struggle. I can remember sitting in the parking lot about to go in, literally crying, saying, God, I don't want this. Everybody's angry at me. Everybody's angry in general in the church. Everybody's angry at me. Parents are. The elders are. The one senior guy on staff is praying for me to find someplace. I can remember calling my dad, who works at Dallas Christian College. I can't do this. If this is what it's like to work with God's people, I want nothing to do with it. I remember my dad said, Kyle, you know God has it. That verse came in mind. And it was in that moment that I felt like God literally whispered, I got you. Just give it to me and stay faithful to the calling I've given you. It's through that faith, through that obstacle, through that horrible, terrible, very bad day that I stand before you today, 10 plus years in ministry, more in love with God's people, not because of the people, but because of how God can use them. James 1, 2 through 4 is my life verse simply because I trusted Him. In the midst of the heartache. So my question to you is, what trial do you need to trust God with? What are you going through right now that you simply need to lay at the foot of the cross and say, God, I can no longer do it. Teach me through this process. Let me become the best for you that I can be through this terrible, horrible, no good day. What do you need to give to Him? Because He's right there with you, ready to take it. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you so much that you gave me this verse from James, your brother, who wrote it so many years ago, and yet so impacted my life. Father, I pray that just sharing this has not only helped me, Father, but has helped those who are hearing it. Father, I pray, Lord, that whatever it is, whatever trial came to mind when I said the words, that we would just simply come before you and lay it at the cross. That we wouldn't hesitate, that we wouldn't wait, that we wouldn't hold on to this, but that we give it up to you so that we can become mature and complete, not lacking anything. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.